Okay, so let's see the practical application we are going to develop now.
Awesome, right? So with that, now you can run the app, right? So let's run and see the app now. So if I click the run button, right, it should run and give a very smooth output. So it says build your first app, enter the message where I can say hello, right, and then click the send button.
Okay, so let's continue to develop this application now.
Hi everyone, the lesson is building your first app part 2 in Android. We'll be using Android Studio version 4.0.1 and Android Developer Docs and API referencing. Prerequisite, you have to have a knowledge in Java programming, and you can find the link for Java programming lessons in the description section of this video if you need a revision. And make sure to look at building your first app part 1. In this lesson, you will learn to build a simple user interface and learn about hierarchy of layouts and widgets, view objects, and constraint layouts, adding text boxes, buttons, and adding constraints, layout editor, strings.xml, and how to make text box flexible and make them responsive. Lesson plan, as usual, is practical demonstrations. So let's look at where we stopped in the previous part 1, right? So in the previous part 1, we did the project up to this level, right? So we have a project and we are aware to run it on an emulator, and the output is just a simple label or a text view, right? So and what we are doing is we are referring to the Android developer docs, right? So we are referring to the Android developer docs because why are we referring to Android developer docs? The reason is that's how developers would do things, right? So we will be showing you how developers are doing stuff while you are learning, right? So to start with, in the developer docs, if you look at building your first app, that's where we were, right? And we started developing the app, right? We created the project, right? And we finished running the app, right? And we created the virtual devices, and we run. So that is what we run here. This virtual device we created, right? And then we are at this level where we are now. What we are going to do is we are going to build a simple user interface, right? So this is the simple user interface we are going to create in this lesson, where you got a text box and a button, right? So so let's read a little bit about the developer docs, right? So we are going to do this, and then here it's explaining that there are view groups and views. So what this say is, at high level you got view groups, and inside view groups you got views. Then what is at high level? It's layouts are at high level, and inside what you have are widgets. So a layout is a subclass of a view group. Then widgets are subclasses of views. So widgets are things like text boxes and buttons, right? So text boxes and buttons. So uh, so that's the hierarchy, right? So I will show you in a little while, right? Android provides XML vocabulary for view groups and view classes. So as we discussed, you are creating your user interface in XML, right? If you remember. So if you look at your project, you will see the front end is a XML, right? That's what we discussed in the previous lesson. So if you look at this XML we discussed, if you go to code, you can see you got the label is a text view, so it's a XML tag, but in the outcome it will be shown as a label. Similarly, if you got a button, you will see XML element called button, but in the outcome you will see the button, right? So keep in mind, in Android the interface is declared using XML, the user interface. Then your logic for that user interface, as discussed earlier, like if you have a button, will be written inside the Java file. So we'll see how to do it in a little while, right? So that's what this developer docs talks. So that's what it says. Most of your UI is defined in XML, right? But however, rather than teaching to write XML, we use the Android Studio's layout editor. So that's what. So though it's written in XML, you don't have to write XML. You can use the design editor and drag and drop using Android Studio's layout editor. So So that's what we are doing, right? And if I further go down, just skipping this, I will come back to that. So you got a constraint layout and a text view, right? So that's true, because if you look at your XML, if you go into that, see what you have is a constraint layout, and inside that what you have is a text view. So this, what is this constraint layout and the text view? That's what it talks here. So you got the constraint layout and the text view. Now if I show you what is this constraint layout and the text view in the Android API, if you Google search for Android API for the text view, you can see, look at the inheritance hierarchy. The text view is a child of view, right? So that's what it said earlier. The text view is a child of view. That's what we said earlier, that the text view is a view is a, the text view is a widget, right? So it's a view. So it's a child of view, right? That's what clearly shows here. Then if you look at the constraint view, right? Let's click on the constraint view. See, the constraint view is extending from view group. See the constraint, the constraint layout, right? It's not constraint, it's constraint layout extends from the view group. So that's clear that the components, the layouts and the widgets are organized. So the constraint layout is a view group, as you saw now, and the text view is a view. So inside view group is what we have views. That is what is here. So inside the view group you got the views. Now you understand that concept. So you have to make it clear, right? That is how the components are organized, right? So now let's work on this, right? So okay, in the project window, open the activity main XML. So we have opened it, right? Let's go to the design view, right? And to make room, it says click the project. So to get more room, you can just look at my mouse, you can just click here the project, so that you know you get more room. And if you want to see the project again, just click, right? So you can view, hide and show, right? Okay, we got some extra space. In your editor shows the XML. If it shows, click design, right? So for example, if it shows XML, you can click the design, look at the mouse, right? That's what it says. Then when you are designing, select the blueprint, right? So using this icon, so basically click here and make sure it selects blueprint while you are designing, right? Very important. Also click this icon and say show all constraints. So over here icon, make sure that the show all constraints are clicked, right? If not, click this, because you are going to declare constraints when you create an interface. All good, right? And then also make sure auto connect is off, right? So this icon over here, so make sure that this is off. If it's off, you will see the tooltip text called enable it, because it's off. Now you can enable, meaning it's currently off, right? So we'll talk about that in more detail, right? And then click the default margins and make it 16, right? So over here, see the default margins over here, right? Click here and make it 16, right? So we are following the developer guide. So this is the first exercise you are doing to create a user interface. So it's good to follow this Android developer guide, so that you get a very clear idea of how you would do things standard, in a standard manner, right? So if you would like to become a great mobile application developer, it's always important to follow the developer guides, right? So that's what we are doing in this lesson, right? Awesome. Then it says the design for preview and select this 5.5 pixel XL, right? So what it says is the preview, right? Design preview, it's asking to select 5.1 pixel XL. So you can click this and decide what preview you want to see. If you want to see a tablet preview, you can select it likewise, right? So we just selected this preview at design view, right? Just this is our first exercise, right? Now it should look like this. Yes, we have our layout editor looking like this, right? You can learn more about the layout editor by clicking this, right? Read that on your own interest. Then the component tree panel shows the layouts hierarchy views, right? So for example, see the component tree, right? Look at my mouse. It shows the layouts hierarchy of views. So it says that it has a constraint layout and a text view. That's correct. because that is what you have here. If you look here, you got a constraint layout and you got a text view, but you are not touching the XML. You are in the design view, but you can have a look at it from the component tree over here, the constraint layout and the text view, right? Awesome. Constraint layout is a layout. We discussed that, right? So let's read more about that. Constraint layout is a layout that defines position of each view, right? What does that mean? Now these are views like labels, text boxes, buttons are views. Then the constraint layout is the layout or the container. So the constraint layout defines the position of each view based on constraints. So it's based on, positions are based on constraints, and those constraints are to the sibling views. Sibling views means the other views. For example, if this, look at this. So if you look at here, these are two views, so they are sibling views. So when I say a view, it's a component like a widget, right? So this view, because remember layouts and widgets, so view is each component like button and text box, right? View group is the layout or the containers. So when I say a view, I'm talking about a component like a text box or a button. So see, these are sibling views. So when in constraint layout, when you are designing positions for the these views, in other words for these components, in other words for these widgets, right? So when you are designing the position for the views, you constrain to sibling views, to each other, right? Let's see how to do it. First let's read this. You constrain to sibling views and the parent layout, right? So some views you will constrain to the parent layout. For example, look at this view A and B. Think this A as that text box, right? And B as the button, right? So if A and B are the text box and the button, so text box is constrained to the parent layout, left and the top, but the button is constrained to its sibling text view. So from there, see, there's a gap kept here, and at its horizontally they are aligned, right? So that's what it talks here. A view A appears 16 dp from the top, so it's 16 dp the distance from the top. View A 16 dp from the left, view B 16 dp to the right of view A. View B appears 16 dp to the right, so view B appears 16 this over here, and view B is aligned to the top of view A, right? So this is how you declare positions in constraint layouts, right? So you are learning a lot here, which is very essential for as your first steps of developing an app to get a clear understanding. Now let's see how you do this, how you create these constraints, right? These are known as constraints. So how do you create these constraints? Let's see. So first of all, we need to add a text box, because in our current project what we have is a label, it's not a text box. So we have to remove this label and add a text box. So first of all, remove the label. So click the text view from the component tree and click the delete, right? So what I'm going to do is, see, from the component tree, look at my mouse, I'm going to click on the label and click the delete key from the keyboard, right? Awesome, it got deleted. What's next? In the palette, click text. So I got a palette, see, palette, click text, awesome, and it will show you all the text. Drag plain text, that is a text box, right? So from here, see, drag the plain text, right? Click the design, so drop it near the top of the layout. So just drag it and drop it near the top somewhere here, right? That's what it says. Awesome, right? And this is a edit text. You can see it in the component tree, it's a edit text. You can further see it in the code, you can see it's a edit text, right? Awesome. So you dragged it, right? Then it says click the view in the design editor, it's clicked already. Then you can see square handles to resize. See the square handles in the four corners, square handles. So you can resize if you want, right? Awesome. You can drag and resize from here, right? See, like this, right? You can drag and resize. I will undo it, right? You can resize it, drag and resize. For you can zoom, right? You can zoom in and out like this if you want to see, like, up to you. You can zoom in and out, right? Awesome, right? Click and hold the anchor on the top side, drag it until snaps to the top of the layout. So what it says, these are anchor tags. So it says click and drag. That is, you are giving a constraint. So if you can see here, it added a constraint of 16 dp from the text box to the top of the container, right? And default margin is set to 16, right? 16. Use the same process and constrain left side. So constrain the left, at least you need to give two constraints for it to identify the correct position. So at least now it knows the text box should be 16 dp from the top and 16 dp from the left. So at least two constraints should be there for a component to be correctly positioned, right? So the result should look like that. Then we have to add a button, right? So from the palette, click on buttons and drag the button to the right hand side, right? So click on buttons, click on the button and drag it to the right hand side of the text box. Awesome, right? Create a constraint from the left side of the button to the right side of the text box, right? So see, create a constraint from the left side of the button to the right side of the text box, right? And again, that constraint is 16 dp. That's the default value it adds, when you add a constraint. You can change it by clicking here, right? You can always click here and change it, right? But the default value is going to be 16. Then to constrain the views in horizontal alignment. Now what I constrain now is the gap, but now then the horizontal alignment of the two, if you want them to be horizontally aligned, it suggests to do so by right clicking the button and say show baseline. So to constrain the two in the same level, to bring them to the same level horizontally, like a horizontal space gap, same level, so it looks nice. Right click and say okay, let's say show baseline, right? So right click and say show baseline, so it's showing the baseline, right? Then click this anchor and drag it to the baseline anchor in the adjacent text box. So drag it, see, to the baseline anchor adjacent text box. That way now the text box and the button are horizontally aligned, right? Awesome. So now the constraints are added, right? So this small part covered you from here to here, from here to here, adding the components and then adding the constraints. Keep in mind you have to add constraints so that when you run this, the components, or in other words the widgets, or in other words the views, will come at the correct positions, right? Awesome, right? You are learning a lot, which is great, right? Awesome. So we added the button. Now we have to change the UI strings. Let's do it now. Okay, so what is this changing the UI strings? Let me explain that to you first. So when you say changing the UI strings, what it means is, okay, so let's click on the design so you can see. Now can you see on the UI components you place on these views, see there's a string, right? There's a text. See, it says name, and what does it say here? It says button here, right? But what do you want? You want them to change as, you want to have like a placeholder, like text telling okay, enter a message, and when the user types, this will go away. Then here it should say send, right? So those are UI strings, right? That is the user interface strings. So we have to change the UI strings because we don't have what we want now. We have to change it, right? So if you want, you can directly type it, right? So what if you want, you can click on the button and you can go to the text, right? And you can say click or something, right? Whatever you want, right? But this is not advisable, because when you do like this, you are binding it into the property palette. And then there's another way of doing it using a file called strings.xml. First I will show you how to do it using strings.xml, then I will explain you why is it better to do this using strings.xml and not to do it like this, right? Same for the text field hint, right? So I can remove the text, right? I can remove the text, then I can put a hint, right? Like enter name, right? But it's not advisable. So for example, now it works. So if I run this now, if I stop this and run this again in the emulator, it works, right? But now there's a tight binding. So it says enter the name. Of course, when I click, it will go away, right? So if I say John, that goes on. Otherwise it will keep and click. So it's working. Enter the name and click as as expected, right? See, enter the name and click. It should say send, right? But I can change it to send. Enter the name and send. So So what I have is enter the name and clicks. If I want it to make send, just click and say send, right? Something like that. Okay, so click it and make it as send, right? Okay, awesome. Right, I can make it send, right? Okay, and if I run this, it will come as stop and click run, it will come as send. But now this is, there's a tight coupling from in the text, the strings of UI into the property palette. But you can do it using strings.xml. Let's do it and then I will explain you what's the advantage of doing it, right? So first of all, to preview the UI, click the design surface and say design. Of course, that's what I have done, right? So click this and design, right? Now I can preview. They have the default values they had, then I change, right? Okay, so there's another way of adding UI strings, right? So in the resource values strings.xml, so if you go to project resources, see values, see there's a strings.xml. This is a XML file where you can declare strings. So normally what we are going to do is we are going to add more and more strings here as key value pairs, and the key is this, then the value is this, and then from the user interface what we are going to do is we are going to refer to those keys and access the text and put those text as values here, right? Let's do it and then you will understand. So I went to the strings.xml, then this is a resource file, right? It's a resource file. You can specify your all your strings here where you can specify. What's the advantage? It allows to add manage your strings, right? Let's first do this. So open the editor and say translations editor, right? So let's go into this. Let me click on the settings. So it says click open editor, so I'm in the strings file, then click open editor. So in that, see translations editor, right? Translations, right? So in that simple interface, then click add, where this is where you can add, see the plus button, add, and then you can add key value pairs. The key is some key and the value is what you want to display on your interface, right? So for example, the key I will call it as hint text and the value is whatever I want, right? So okay, the text, let's add new string as the hint text. So okay, let's see how it is added. Yeah, so as the hint text, okay, the hint text is key is edit message, right? So the key is okay, edit message, okay, and it's like enter a message, right? So that is the hint, right? And click OK, so that got added. See edit message, it got added. And if you look at the XML file, if you go into this, see it's added now as a key and a value, right? So open editor, translation editor, and to the button send, another key, right? So plus button send and the value send. So the value send, why do I put the value send? Because that's what I want to display here. See send, right? I want to display it. So that is the value, right? Enter message is the value, enter message and send are the values, right? That is what basically we are adding here, right? Send, right? So if you look at the XML, you will see now it got the send as, but the key is button send. So what I'm going to do now is from the property palette, I'm going to refer to this key and use this value. Whenever I want to use this value, I'm getting it through this key. If I want to use this value, I'm getting it through this key, right? So the key is edit message and button send. Awesome, right? Now return to the activity main XML, that is our user interface XML. So now from the strings XML, I'm coming to the activity main dot XML, right? Awesome, right? Now in the activity main dot XML, right? Let's see what it's asking us to do. Click on the text box, right? So okay, text box, and then go to the attributes, right? If you can't see them, you can right click and say click attributes, text property. So for the text, okay, I got the text property. I had something, so I deleted it, right? Deleted, right? So I deleted it little while ago in the video, if you remember, right? And then go to the hint, because I want to display hint. As the hint property, at the moment I have a value, so I'm going to delete it. Instead of having the value here, I'm going to pick a resource to right of the text box. So that means just click here, this one, pick a resource, click. Now you will get this dialog box, right? And from that, double click edit message. So what is this edit message? That is the strings.xml. See, strings.xml, they are resources. See, look at my mouse. Strings.xml is a value in resources. So what I'm telling is, as the hint of the text box, I'm telling, okay, I will cancel again and show you. I'm clicking here, pick a resource. Then I'm telling, as the hint of the text box, I want this resource edit message. So edit message is the key of that string. So when I click OK, it says strings edit message. Then if you look at strings edit message is this message, enter a message. So that is what will be taken now as the value of the hint, right? So listen to this couple of times, then you will understand. Same I'm going to do for the button, text property of the button, pick a resource. So let me go to the button. Let's delete it because I don't want to hard code it here, and let's click on the button, right? Then let's click on the text property of the button, right? Text property, click this, pick a resource, and see the button send is the key, and click OK. So the text is from the string button send, and in the string button send the value is send. So now what happens is, as the text of the button, it will have that value and you will see it when you run, right? Awesome, right? So that with that you successfully completed how and learn about how to change the UI strings in the user interface, right? Awesome. Then we are coming to the last part of it, right? And then you can run the app, right? The last part of this is how to make the text box size flexible. What does that mean? What that means is, now when you run this app, let's say if I run this now, right? If I run this app, I can see somewhat a nice interface, right, with the text box and the button. But let's say if I run this on an iPad, now what happens? I will get a larger screen. Sorry, if on a tab, right? So if I run this on a tab, because the tab has a larger screen, on a larger screen, I would like the text box also to resize, right? So how can I get it done, right? So this resizing. So that's what we are going to talk, how to make the text box flexible, right? So let's look into that now. Okay, let's look into that. So to create layouts that are responsive, so you call it as responsive layouts, right? Or creating user interfaces which are responsive, or we call it as responsive design, right? So if you want it to be responsive to different screen sizes, let's do a small trick for that. So click the blueprint, very important. So just click this and make sure you are in the blueprint so you can see the constraints and everything very clearly. Right now, to make the text box flexible, it says select both the views, right? Okay, so it's asking to select both the views. Let's look at this. Let's look a few things. Say select both the views using the shift key and right click on one and say change, create horizontal chain. So what it means is select one, then press the shift key and select the other one, and then right click and say change, create horizontal chain. Right click, change, and horizontal chain. So see what happens. So it creates, see, a effect of a chain. We'll see what it is, right? So a chain is a bidirectional constraint between two or more views that allows you to lay out in a chain view, right? So we'll talk about that in more detail later, right? So now you got a constraint between this, a chain constraint. Then select the button, and in the attributes window, use the inspector and set the right margin to 16. So that means sixth button, see, and then the attributes window, view inspector, this is a view inspector, right? And then set the right margin to 16. So that means, see, the button right margin into 16. Awesome, right? Then click on the text box, click within the width indicator twice so that it says so match constraint. So just click here twice, right? That's what it says, right? Okay, as indicated by. So if I click here twice, see, it got changed, right? So this is how you get it, you get that thing sorted, right? This is how you get that thing sorted, right? Okay, so let me look into that. Okay, so let's see. So I think I did a mistake. I will undo once. So I will edit, undo, because it resized the button. So what I have to do is click on the text box, right? So that's a mistake. Click on the text box and then double click the width indicator. So after clicking the text box, then only I have to double click this, right? Awesome, right? So it then it stretches the text box so that it will get auto adapted, right? We call it as match the constraints, right? So it's matching the constraints behind in the two sides, right? So it got some constraints from the left, had a constraint from the right, then it had a constraint to the button. So now it will always get adapted to match to the constraint. So if I run this on a larger tablet, what happens is, if I run this on a larger tab, the text box will resize. So we'll learn more about this later. So if it's confusing to you, don't worry. Now if what I did now is confusing to you, which means if this part is making text box flexible, if it confuses you, don't worry, just forget it. We'll do it in more detail and we'll explain more in future lessons. So don't worry about that, right? Awesome. You can see the final XML layout. So what it says is, if you go and check your XML, you will see that it has added lots of stuff, right? It's referring to the strings XML, or you see, right? The button text is also taken from the strings, the hint is taken from the strings. Likewise, it has updated. So every time you do things here in the design view, it's updating the XML, right? Awesome, right? So with that, now you can run the app, right? So let's run and see the app now. So if I click the run button, right, it should run and give a very smooth output. So it says build your first app, enter the message where I can say hello, right, and then click the send button. Still the send button doesn't work. That's we do in the next part of the lesson. So that will be the next lesson in the next video, right? Awesome, right? So we got a nice simple app interface created. So we successfully created a simple user interface, right? Let's see what's next. So we completed the practical demonstration successfully, right? And conclusion, you learn about how to develop a simple interface. You learn about hierarchy of layouts, view groups, view objects. You saw the containers are inside view groups, the widgets such as buttons, text boxes are inside view objects. Conclusion, you learn about constraint layout. Everything is inside that, and inside that you created text boxes and buttons. You added constraints. That's what we did by dragging and adding constraints. We used the layout editor, and we did use UI strings, so that we added into the strings XML and we referred them from the user interface. And then we did make text box flexible, and we made the responsive layout, right? So that the text box is responsive, or the screen is responsive for different screen sizes. That is what the last thing we did. But if it's not clear to you, don't worry about that. We'll be discussing that more detail in future lessons. Reference, we use Android developer docs and APIs. What's next? It is very important to have a look at the next lesson to complete this wonderful app, right? And also have a look at the other videos and practical lessons on Android A to Z, right? Okay, we are very excited to catch you in the next lesson. See you in the next lesson.